Carswell Air Force Base. This base in Fort Worth, Texas is arguably more well known for stories of alien activity than any military maneuvers. The legend started back in 1947 with the Roswell incident. What was initially reported as the crashing of a UFO in New Mexico turned out to be a story of mistaken identity. The so-called alien vessel was actually a weather balloon, according to the military's top brass. A press conference in Texas saw General Roger Ramey reveal the supposed truth behind the incident. At least, that was their version of events. Trouble is, witnesses reported seeing metallic elements being flown to Carswell Air Force Base. Robert Shirky, an operations officer, described something that looked like aluminum parts bearing symbols of some kind. Now, the military were definitely covering something up, that much is correct. We don't know if it was a UFO, but one thing we can certainly say is that this was no weather balloon. The Roswell crash actually involved the secretive Project Mogul, designed to listen out for atomic tests carried out by the Soviets. It's been revealed that they were not actually related to extraterrestrial visitors at all. So it's no wonder the officers were being mysterious. However, in a further twist, some think the press conference at Carswell accidentally photographed documents that show a UFO with some passengers had been found. It seems like wishful thinking to me, but to those who want to believe, it's a gold mine. Talk about being through the looking glass. Crashed American plane in India. World War II saw pilots taking to the skies over some pretty tough environments. One such place was Northeast India, where an area known as the Aluminum Trail is found. Why is it called that? The reason is rather grim. So many planes crashed there, it's a macabre collection of aircraft parts and other litter from military mishaps. Adventurer Shahwar Hussain reported in 2019 about tracking down one of these lost planes. He ventured into the state of Arunachal Pradesh, where it's believed a majority of the flyers went down. An extraordinary 500 or more military men met their makers in the mountains and jungle below. Hussain received word that something had been found, so set off on a multi-day trek where he encountered blood-sucking leeches, treacherous terrain, and other threats. When he got to his destination, he discovered the remains of a B-24 Liberator bomber plane used by the Americans. Bits of it were strewn across the area, where they'd become part of the landscape. In one example, trees had grown over propellers. The 8 brave men who were in this plane were helping China defend itself from the Japanese invasion in January 1944. They died far from home, but their contribution will never be forgotten. Gold Rush. It's everybody's dream to buy a tank. Who doesn't want to drive around their neighborhood in a massive military tank? I mean, I would. Over in the UK, a special restoration company actually gets to do it every day. The company is called Tanks A Lot, and they restore tanks and drive them, and even supply tanks for films. But in 2017, the owner of Tanks A Lot got a bit more than he bargained for when he purchased a Chinese Type 69 tank off eBay for $37,000. The tank was modeled after the Russian T-54 and produced by Chinese manufacturers to be sold to Iraqi military during the Gulf War. After a bit of bartering, the tank was brought to the UK for restoration. However, while the tank was being disassembled, one of the mechanics realized that one of the fuel tanks was filled with something. The mechanic first assumed it was full of guns, which would not have been surprising at all. However, what the mechanics found instead were 5 bars of gold worth about $2.4 million. That's quite a bit of return on the original investment. According to The Drive, the gold was likely smuggled into the tank during the Gulf War between 1990 and 1991. Unfortunately, the gold was handed over to the police and nobody got to see a penny. That's always the way, isn't it? Dobbins Air Reserve Base. Georgia is certainly the place to be if you're hoping to see a UFO. And Dobbins Air Reserve Base in Cobb County has witnessed its fair share of off-the-wall stuff. 1952 was the year airmen at the base described seeing an unidentified object traveling at an eye-popping speed of 1,200 miles per hour, 1,900 kilometers per hour. It wasn't only human eyes who picked up the object. Radar confirmed it was no hallucination. What exactly was this superfast sighting? No one can say, but according to author Michael Hitt, there were over 200 reports of UFOs in Georgia over a 40-year period. Why is Georgia such a popular location with UFOs? Perhaps the sightings of UFOs are connected to the locations of major military bases, and Georgia has a lot of them. Did you ever happen to watch the movie Superman 2? If you did, you'll remember those creepy black shapes that used to fly in and capture people. Well, prepare to relive those memories, as this huge black square was seen in the sky last year, and it just so happened to be within range of the Dobbins base. If aliens are behind these sightings, then they sure are getting a little overconfident. Eora Creek Battlefield. The brutal conflict between Australian and Japanese forces at Kokoda in Papua New Guinea in 1942 resulted in many casualties. What took place near the location of Eora Creek was just one bloody chapter of the Allied war in the Pacific, but one that was shrouded in mystery. There was a big question over where exactly the fighting took place amongst the Owen Stanley Mountains. This detail remained elusive until 2010. Ex-Australian Army Captain Brian Freeman went looking for the site, working closely with the local Alola villagers. He finally uncovered what has been described as a living museum. 79 Australian soldiers and around 69 Japanese troops met their deaths, as the latter defended their strategic position. Objects such as guns, ammunition, and helmets were found on the plateau, together with the bodies themselves. The fallen were repatriated, and the area appears to be preserved as a reminder of dark times past. German Panzer. German Panzer tanks were extremely common tools of war back during World War II. Panzer tanks were even used after the war by some European nations as Cold War deterrents against Russia. After the end of the Second World War, roughly 100 Panzer tanks were buried on the southeastern border of Bulgaria and were meant to be used as stationary weapons in case of an attack. The Panzer tanks were put into defensive positions to fend against any incoming military from Turkey. Then again in 1974, the Bulgarian army added even more defenses with 100 Soviet T-34 tanks being buried up to their guns. After the Cold War was over, the Bulgarian army just sort of forgot about all the tanks they had buried in the dirt. Looters, however, never forgot. Many of these tanks were dug up, moved, and stripped of their parts. Many of these tanks were sold as scrap, and other parts were sold to private collectors. It wasn't until around 2007 that the Bulgarian army slowly began to recover their buried tanks. Now you can find countless stories of the forgotten and buried Panzer tanks and Soviet T-34 tanks that had been rotting underground for over 50 years. Some of them are in seriously rough shape. Fort Dix. As stories of aliens and the military go, they don't come more dramatic than Fort Dix in Burlington County, New Jersey. This rural location houses military exercises, a prison, and apparently even a few UFOs. Reports that were finally revealed last year claim a spacecraft was seen flying over the base in 1978 by a military policeman. The ship was a blue-green in color and oval-shaped. When the craft landed, the military officer then saw a gray and brown figure stepping out in front of his truck. Whoever, or indeed whatever the surprise guest was, it was 4 feet, 1.3 meters high, with a big head and skinny frame. Did he or she come in peace? We'll never know, because someone shot the alien before any close encounter could occur. The incident is described in the book Strange Craft by John L. Guerra. George Filer, a retired major in the Air Force, spoke to Guerra and revealed details of the gruesome story. Apparently, after the shooting happened, the policeman was hit by a strong ammonia-like smell. Where did the dead extraterrestrial wind up? Apparently, a team from the Wright-Patterson base all the way in Ohio were called to handle the situation. Why would the government decide to send a special team from hundreds of miles away to remove a mysterious deceased alien? The answer might surprise you. This unique team from this particular military base come up again later though, so keep watching to find out more. Hitler's gold. War isn't all about material like bombs, bullets, and tanks. There's usually a hell of a lot of money involved as well, not to mention treasures from the art world and elsewhere that armies had their eyes on. One of the most notorious elements of the Second World War was Nazi gold. In 2017, a stash was found by an intrepid explorer, but there's a twist in the tale, as you'll discover. A treasure seeker named Hans Gluck, aged in his 70s, spent a sizable portion of his life trying to trace a wartime hoard containing extremely valuable items like gold and artworks. The collection was part of the Nazis' ill-gotten gains and featured things that had been stolen from Jewish properties. These were on their way to the Alps at the end of the war, where the Führer's beaten men were planning to hide out. The train carrying the treasure was attacked, and the hoard taken by Germans to the woods of Bavaria. Obviously, this is a big place, and when Hans Gluck worked out where it was, he set off to claim it. However, there was a problem. The person who owned the land didn't exactly hit it off with Gluck, and refused to let him dig up the goodies. With a price tag of around $640 million, the explorer was not amused. Band of Brothers. A judge in Luzerne County recently found a stash of over 820 World War II letters written by his father. He came upon these jarringly emotional letters while doing some spring cleaning at his family homestead in Fairview. All the letters he found were still in mint condition, and they were all taken out of his father's army footlocker, which nobody had known was in the storage space underneath the porch of the family home. This may not be as cool or exciting as buried tanks, but it is powerfully emotional for the son who found his father's military letters. According to him, it was a real reminder of what the world used to be like. The man's father had been a member of the Easy Company of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne Division, the very same company that was recognized in the HBO series Band of Brothers. The 800-plus letters detailed his life from the time he first entered the military until his service was over, complete with many emotional letters to his parents. In one of the letters, he wrote, "The Germans are kind of foolish to hang on." And yes, they certainly were. Holloman Air Force Base. 1974 saw the release of UFOs, Past, Present, and Future. This in-depth documentary was presented by The Twilight Zone's Rod Serling and gave audiences a look at alien activity like never before. Crucially, producers Robert Emeniger and Alan Sandler were given permission to interview key government figures and gained access to supposed footage of UFOs. Some photos were even provided by NASA and showed freaky things going on in space. Unbelievably, the filmmakers didn't have to persuade the establishment to take part. In fact, the military apparently asked him to make the documentary in the first place. Was there any conclusive proof of alien life on screen? Apparently not. Or was there? Hidden away in the documentary is a snippet from what's said to be an actual alien landing at Holloman Air Force Base in Otero County, New Mexico, a few years earlier. According to writer Robbie Graham, it's part of a longer film that the team were originally going to use. Then permission was denied at the last minute. The full-length version reportedly features 3 crafts, one of which lands revealing 3 extraterrestrials. Why was the sensational material offered then withdrawn? The official line is that people wouldn't be able to handle it, what with the scandal of Watergate breaking at the same time. Apparently, the men in charge agreed that with too much sensational news, the American people wouldn't be able to take information about extraterrestrials and might collectively lose their minds. It was decided that a fictionalized scenario, based on what allegedly happened at Holloman, would be presented. The filmmakers wanted to at least show how authorities might react to a bona fide alien encounter. And it's here that the briefer-than-brief glimpse of footage can be seen, added during the early stages of editing when they thought they could show the whole clip. Intriguing, huh? And pretty wild stuff. But what's even wilder is that some see this as evidence of shadowy figures higher up, who are trying to push the idea of aliens and UFOs to the public through Hollywood movies. Might they be trying to prepare mankind for the arrival of our new alien overlords? Or is it all one big bluff to distract us from something else? The truth is out there. If you think about it too long, you might just go crazy. Or maybe it's everyone else who's crazy. You just don't know for sure. Tank bunkers. It seems like a crazy idea, but burying a tank so it could be used as a fort proved very useful to armies around the world. How did it all start? In World War I, the French military decided to turn their FT-17s into underground defense turrets. This model of tank was perfect for the job as it could rotate, a new development at that time. From there, other armies from Belgium and the Soviet Union began adapting their old vehicles for use as turrets. These were essentially portable powerhouses and took a reported 3 hours plus to get into the ground. In some cases, the entire tank would be lowered inside and surrounded with concrete after the engine and tracks were taken off. Once the Germans got in on the act, they did things a little differently. A 2-story box was constructed that the turret rested on, so it was like a weird kind of house planted in the middle of the battlefield, only one with an enormous Panther gun instead of a roof. It must have been surreal finding these turrets sticking up out of the earth years later. It kind of looks like a tank maybe sank in quicksand or something, but no. This was a deliberate and highly effective way of keeping the enemy at bay. I'm genuinely impressed by the military genius at work with this innovation. Hitler's Wolf Lair. One of the most famous military headquarters in the world is Adolf Hitler's Wolf's Lair. It was constructed during World War II for the start of Operation Barbarossa, which was the invasion of the Soviet Union that went down in 1941. The Wolf's Lair was also the site where in July of 1944, a group of officers tried to assassinate Hitler and failed. And while most researchers thought everything about this site was already found, there were recent unexpected discoveries at this military installation. Some new things that have been recovered include armored doors, pipes, taps, sinks, fittings, and a stone engraved with the Führer's escort battalion and a painted flag. This allows researchers to understand a bit more about Hitler's personal escort battalion and how they lived. Their biggest concern is being able to present their finding as a piece of history without promoting any kind of criminal ideology. Kirtland Air Force Base. A long-standing source of unexplained sightings is Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Back in 1957, 2 controllers on duty at the tower reported seeing a white light traveling at high speed. Closer inspection revealed that the light was shining from the bottom of an egg-shaped vehicle of some kind, measuring approximately 15 to 20 feet, 5 to 6 meters in height. The craft moved faster than a normal aircraft, according to observers, and flew in a way worthy of a stunt pilot. When authorities got involved, the incident was put down to a regular plane that simply couldn't be seen properly. That view didn't ring true for some. The egg was apparently visible the whole time, and people seemed convinced that they saw what they saw. Despite the involvement of the famous Project Blue Book, a group looking into unusual phenomena for the government, it was thought the case wasn't investigated properly. After a few decades passed, ufologists got excited all over again. In 1979, physicist Paul Benowitz began documenting weird lights heading in the direction of the Kirtland base and nearby Coyote Canyon. He filmed the lights and made sound recordings of radio transmissions the lights are said to have made. Benowitz was convinced he was watching things from beyond our world. He went so far as to say the aliens were manipulating people on the ground using electromagnetic technology. It sounds completely insane, to be honest. But mad scientists are often thought to be crazy until they're proven right. And that's not all. The following year, the base's radar was jammed for several hours, which just so happened to coincide with guards at Kirtland spotting UFOs around Coyote Canyon. Whatever you think of all these incidents, you've got to agree that they're pretty fascinating, right? World War II film rolls. Just when you think you've seen everything World War II has to offer, along comes a big surprise. The conflict was a terrible period in human history, but numerous artists sought to paint pictures and take photographs of what was happening. Some were famous, and some were anonymous. One such anonymous person, an American soldier, took no less than 31 rolls of film, depicting what life was like on the ground for soldiers and the general population. This priceless and deeply personal record may never have seen the light of day, were it not for photographer Levi Betweise. He runs the Rescued Film Project, and in 2014 acquired the precious rolls. It was a difficult undertaking, but he managed to develop the old negatives, revealing a unique view of the world. Rust had gotten to some of the rolls. Who knows what would have happened to these films had Betweise not worked out his magic. The secret images were accompanied by notes from the snapper in question, though ultimately their identity remains a mystery. This photographer opened up a whole world to historians and researchers, one that would never have been discovered if it weren't for a brave anonymous soldier from 80 years ago. Alcatraz military tunnels. Using the incredible power of radar and laser scanning, archaeologists recently revealed a hidden military tunnel, complete with military fortifications beneath Alcatraz. If you thought Alcatraz was only an island prison, you were wrong. Before Alcatraz Island became the site of the world-famous prison, it was home to a coastal fortification. The name for this fortification was Fort Alcatraz, and it was designed to protect the San Francisco Bay way back in the 1800s. At one point, there were 140 artillery pieces on the island, according to the National Park Service. Currently, there are only a few remnants of its time as a fort still visible. However, beneath the island is a different story. By performing high-tech scans of the penitentiary's recreation yard, then cross-referencing the data with old maps, researchers uncovered a tunnel network made of bricks beneath the island, complete with ventilation ducts. According to Fox News, the recreation yard is sitting only a few inches over the original military fort structure from the 1800s. It was unexpected that such archaeological features would be so impeccably preserved after so much time left buried beneath the prison. 29 Palms. The city of 29 Palms in San Bernardino County, California is a calm and peaceful town with a lot of mystery beneath the surface, or behind closed gates. Not far from the famous UFO crash site of Roswell, it has a local military institution which is the biggest Marine Corps base in the country. Plenty of room for hiding aliens, right? In fact, a sighting happened just last year. YouTuber Cody Kennedy was driving at night looking for snakes for his channel Crazy Cody's Creatures. He didn't see anything wriggling on the ground, but looking up, he spotted a weird glowing worm that he kept track of for half an hour before it fell from the sky. He never managed to catch up with it. It could have been a kite or a drone of some kind, It seems more likely that it's one of those being whipped around in the wind, or it could even be a flag. As you can see, it does have this strange rippling quality to it. It could even be a plastic bag filled with some type of glowing substance. To me, it mostly looks like a bar of light wrapped in a big tarp, but it's certainly weird. Whatever it is, it's got people's imaginations racing. 29 Palms Base is known for conducting supersized military exercises, including one later that year. Could this have anything to do with the sky worm? Keep watching the skies. Unexploded bomb in London. Britain's capital experienced serious bomb damage during the Blitz in the early days of World War II. Those days are thankfully over, though of course unexploded bombs still remain in obscure locations. One of these was dramatically found in East London as recently as 2015. Scary, right? The location was a basement in Bethnal Green, where building work was taking place. Authorities worked fast to secure the area and make sure people were safe. And this effort wasn't just to warn a few people, by the way. 700 people needed to be evacuated. They wound up spending the night in a school while a wide space was cleared around the site. The bomb, which weighed 500 pounds, 230 kilograms, had fallen from the sky decades ago and clearly not served its intended purpose. That deadly mission was nearly fulfilled in the 21st century. Experts pointed out that the device was still very dangerous. The bomb disposal team needed to carefully dig around the bomb and its fuse in order to finally deactivate it. Reports state this wasn't an isolated case that year. Bermondsey and Wembley, also in London, were found to have their own unexploded bombs also. I'm guessing these won't be the last ones, though. Someday, the last unexploded ordnance will be defused, but not at least for a few more years. Military relics. Thanks to Cyclone Harold, a treasure trove of United States military relics from World War II have been uncovered, giving military historians new insight into the war effort that occurred in Vanuatu, as well as the daily lives of United States personnel. In Vanuatu, where the cyclone hit, many military items were washed out of embankments along numerous coastal shorelines. Among the unexpected items were bronze fittings, belt buckles, silver coins, bottles, a brass flashlight, and even a data plate from a United States Navy 10-man balsa wood and canvas life raft. While the cyclone did destroy many local houses, it also washed out lots of very interesting military artifacts. The Category 5 storm lasted for about a week, killing dozens and destroying homes. And the cyclone also uprooted trees and exposed a ramp that had been buried under the sand. The mat had been used as a runway for refueling and maintaining seaplanes during the war. There were even exhaust manifolds from seaplanes found and an aircraft float marker that had been used for locating drowned pilots after battles. With so many relics being uncovered, there are lots of little untold stories being brought back to life for the military historians residing in Vanuatu. Wisconsin rocket. If your nerves aren't sufficiently shredded after that alarming story, then what about this next one? In 2016, a homeowner in the States got the shock of his life after deciding to have a clear-out. Venturing into his basement, Wisconsin resident Jim Thomas, who lives in the city of Fond du Lac, noticed something odd about one of his shelves. It looked like a regular shelf at first glance, but then Jim realized it had a fake top that could be opened up. Pretty crazy, no? His mind must have been racing, wondering what it was that it could possibly hide. We're betting he didn't expect to find a bazooka from World War II, though. Yes, Jim had been living on top of a deadly weapon this whole time. Even more worryingly, it was next to the support beams. So if anything had happened, he'd really have been in trouble. What was it doing there? Was a previous occupier a war collector? Or maybe just an insane person who figured they'd need access to a bazooka at some point? Either way, he needed to call the authorities, and fast. The police showed up to investigate, and everything got shut down while it was established whether the device was still ready to blast off. Luckily, it only had a training round inside. Still, the sight of it alone is enough to get anyone wetting their pants. Speaking of which, this isn't the only terrifying story to come out of this small Wisconsin town. Reports go on to say that an unexploded grenade was found in another Fond du Lac home. What is it with this place? And astonishingly, there was no pin. How was it prevented from blowing up? Why, rubber bands, of course, which were in the process of falling to pieces. You learn something new every day, though it doesn't always make it easier to sleep at night. Mystery device. A mysterious device that looks an awful lot like a naval mine was washed ashore at the small town of Kill Devil Hills in North Carolina. North Carolina has a long history of finding old military mines, torpedoes, and other military ordnance, specifically at the barrier islands. And while the people who first uncovered this strange, barnacle-encrusted device on the beach immediately assumed it was a bomb, experts are saying it is actually a target, not a bomb. But it definitely looks like a military explosive. In fact, the washed-up piece of ordnance looks a lot like a massive grenade. According to news reports, experts are saying it's some kind of anti-submarine target that would have been used by military personnel for practicing. While it's not going to explode and harm anyone, the local authorities are saying for curious explorers to remain safe when taking a look, as it's covered in sharp sea things. Because of so many military exercises being staged off the coast of North Carolina, it's nothing new for a bomb or an old missile to wash ashore. But a target is definitely something new. Deepest World War II shipwreck. In 2019, the deepest sunken shipwreck ever discovered was found in the Philippine Sea. It was the wreck of a United States World War II destroyer, and it was found at an outstanding depth of 20,406 feet below the surface of the ocean. Explorers had to use an undersea drone to locate the strange ship, which they believed to be the USS Johnston. It was a Fletcher-class destroyer that had been sunk during the Battle of Sambar back in 1944. Some of the footage captured from their underwater drone is incredibly creepy, looking at the boat overturned on the floor of the ocean. According to history, the USS Johnston sank on October 25th of 1944 after an intense battle with Japanese military forces. The ship had a crew of 341 at the time, but only about 141 of them survived. An estimated 50 were killed because of enemy actions, while 45 died on rafts due to injuries. 92 of them were left alive in the water after the boat sank, but were never seen again. Researchers also discovered one of the very first Japanese battleships ever sunk by United States forces in 2019. They found the Imperial Japanese Navy ship, Hiei, where it had been destroyed and sank to the ocean floor on November 14, 1942. Terracotta Warriors. Most of us are familiar with the Terracotta Army, the 8,000 warriors perfectly preserved from over 2,200 years ago, made to protect the emperor in his afterlife. But in 2020, even more terracotta warriors were found. An additional 200 sculptures were uncovered near the tomb of the first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang. The discovery was made during an excavation that had been going on for over a decade. They were found near the area where 6,000 warriors had already been found. Out of these new 200 terracotta warriors, there were 12 clay horses found, 2 chariots, a handful of bronze weapons, and of course, the warriors themselves. Most of the warriors are depicted holding poles or bows, which reveals to researchers the different roles that soldiers played on the battlefield of ancient China. The terracotta warriors were first discovered by local farmers trying to dig a well back in 1974. They accidentally stumbled upon a vault that held the thousands of human-sized military warriors. And ever since then, it seems that every few years there are more and more terracotta warriors found. Researchers believe it took at least 700,000 laborers roughly 40 years to complete the terracotta army and their tombs. And in all likelihood, there is still more to discover. As a fun fact, the first emperor of China was also the one who was responsible for creating the Great Wall of China. Planes in a lagoon. There is no shortage of military hardware sitting on the bottom of the ocean. Just recently in 2020, researchers found 3 U.S. military aircrafts sitting at the bottom of a lagoon that had been lost during a battle in 1944. The researchers discovered 2 SBD-5 Dauntless dive bombers and 1 TBM F-1 Avenger while inspecting Truk Lagoon in Micronesia. This exact location had been the setting for a battle almost 80 years ago. It had been a 2-day assault on a Japanese naval base with more than 50 Japanese boats and 230 aircraft, 30 of which were US, being lost in the lagoon. But now these planes have been found. They aren't in very good shape, but they can clearly be seen rusting at the bottom of Truk Lagoon. If you're a good diver, you should definitely go and check it out. That's all for today, folks. Which of these military discoveries interests you the most? Tell me in the comments below, and thanks so much for watching. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit subscribe and see you again soon for another amazing video.